Thanks for joining on the latest Sheridan's podcast. I'm absolutely delighted to have a stellar lineup of guests for today's chat. We've got a really good friend and client of Sheridan's, Nick Robinson from ISC with us, along with some sporting royalty in Freddie Burns and Zoe Smith as well. So guys, thanks very much for joining. And this is a special one to some degree also because Nick and I have spent some time trying to think about how to promote in a positive way all the great stuff that you've been doing alongside your agency and commercial business for your foundation, DfY. And I see you've obviously got the cap on. You live in the brand, which is
winning.
Great, correct. And it was really just to have a half an hour chat with the three of you about DfY, where it's come from, the sort of ambassadorial roles that you're playing, and just to hear what it's like being an elite sports person is the truth. I'm really fascinated. I chatted with Zoe a little bit, which was great a while back, but just to have a bit more insight. So Nick, over to you if that's all right, which is, where did DfY come from? How long has it been in the pipeline, and how's it all going?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having us on, Daniel. I appreciate that. But DfY, the idea of DfY started about 18 months ago when my wife and I, it was Christmas time, particularly emotional time of the year. And we struggled to find somewhere where we could really have an impact, partly, because we weren't registered and we hadn't kind of done a lot of the steps to try and be involved with something. And it was around that time we decided perhaps, we could create our own foundation or our own charity. And, we thought about it. We had, the desire to do something for those that really need it. And B, we had the tools in a sense. We have many of the things that actually a lot of charities struggle for, which is we had a great roster of clients that were at the top of their game in whatever field or sport that they partake in. And through our company, we also had a big commercial division. Very talented people that are looking at endorsements and sponsorships and tie-ups with brands. And we thought we actually had all the tools to actually make something that could really, if it got off the ground, have a bit of an impact. And leave some kind of legacy beyond, what we do every day. So that was where the idea came from, and we did quite a lot of research. We spoke to some very accomplished people in that field and got quite a few ideas, and we ended up coming up with the idea of DfY, which essentially uses our ambassadors, two of which we got here, to engage with disillusioned or disaffected kids who don't have access to the springboards that give others a head start in life. They're more privileged peers, that head start. But having worked in this now for 18 months, you really see, particularly, our focus is around, at the minute, we will expand, but at the minute around the ages of 10 to 11, you can already see a huge difference between those kids that have got all those opportunities and have got positive role models and come from a solid home, etc. So we had our first pilot scheme last year. We went into a school in Wembley, Art Wembley, and we took over essentially their PE class for the Easter term, and we split the classes into two sections. One was actually in the classroom, and we would talk about particular values that we were going to focus on that day. So that might be teamwork or dedication, or even some of the early ones were just enjoyment. And we would focus on what that would mean in the classroom and what that meant in people's lives, and how our ambassadors, our elite ambassadors, have used those particular values to get to the top of their field and to reach the success that they had. and also talk about the challenges they've had to overcome on that journey. So we had a really great learning experience. And then for the second half of it, we would go out and we would do very basic rugby skills, or passing drills, or sprinting, or even just tag or British Bulldogs or something. And we would focus on the values that we'd spoken about and how those played out in the field. And then our plan was to do it again this Easter term in a different school, but unfortunately COVID-19 meant that we weren't able to do that. So the aim of the fundraising drive is to get someone, really talented and driven, accomplished person who can take DfY onto the next level, and hopefully expand into other areas as well, other schools, other sports. And what's unique about this second year that we're in is we're now identifying certain mentors that, for the most in need kids, are actually going to work with these kids on an ongoing basis, on a support basis, just to check in with them once a week, or more or less, or depending how much they need that, but just to actually kind of be that ongoing role model, that ongoing mentor to help their kids make the right choices, or the choices that are best for them, and just be a kind of a support or a sounding board, or some kind of assistance for those most in need. So we really hope that actually beyond the high profile ambassadors, which have been absolutely amazing, some of the most in need kids will have this regular help, and really enable them to realize their full potential.
I'm going to say two things very quickly. Fred, I can see that there's a little smirk every now and then that comes on your face. It almost feels like Fred's listening to all of the stuff that Nick's saying, so it's amazing, but I know he's not as serious as that all the time.
No, exactly. I was always the kid at school who's like attention, and I'm giggling because I'm like, I catch myself on camera and I'm like, God, Fred, I can't sit still. I'm like a fidget. So I'm laughing almost at myself, being like, keep it professional, Fred. And it's just funny. I've known Robbo for, 13, 14 years now. So it's like, yeah, it's just quite funny seeing ultra serious Robbo right now. But it's,
I didn't have the zoom on because I just knew that if I probably saw Fred or Zoe's face, it would really put me off. So I just had it on like a blank screen.
Whereas, this is me not trying to psychoanalyze everything, Zoe was like absolutely perfectly just listening on, waiting for a moment. I can see you ticking over what the things I'm going to say. It's like you can see, it's like just from my personal. So I'm going to go with Zoe first, if that's all right, just to say, Zoe, I'm really, we had a chat up in Loughborough a little bit ago when Nick and I were giving a talk, which was great. And I know obviously you're, got a great backstory generally, and all of the stuff that has gone on, setbacks and positive stuff. When Nick talks about the mentorship, giving back, wanting to make change, all that type of thing, did that resonate quite a lot when Nick came to you to say, would you like to get involved?
Yeah, absolutely, it did. It's a funny one because I just think of me as just being, I feel like I'm still on this journey myself, where I'm basically, I feel like I need a mentor most of the time, but to be approached to sort of be in a position of mentorship was, it's a real honour. So thank you, Nick. Like I say, I'm not sure I'm quite ready for it yet, but I guess it's a learning process, and there are lots of events, shall we say, that have happened in my career that I've obviously had to learn and grow from. And if I can pass some of that on to some young kids, so they don't have to go through that themselves, they can kind of learn through my experience, I think that's something that I'd be really passionate about getting involved with.
And just say, Zoe is one of the most humble athletes I represent ever has. I feel like she still doesn't really believe that she's British and Commonwealth champion and record.
I'm just realistic about these things.
It's a great attribute. But I mean, Zoe, you've obviously had to overcome some serious setbacks in your career. I was there for one such setback, which was in the British Championships just prior to the Rio 2016 Olympics. I can't remember if it was maybe 2 months before or something.
I think it was the June before Rio was supposed to happen. So I think the game started in August, and the last qualification competition was in June, like middle of June, I think. The British Championships, which was basically like the British team, we've solidified 2 places, one for men, one for women. And then it was just down to the wire on the day, like whoever lifts the most on that day can go to the Olympics, basically. And that's kind of done within weight categories. So I wasn't actually competing against anyone that was really going to challenge me for my position, but it was like across all of the British team. And I just had like not a great prep for it, I think. So I was competing in the 63 kilo division, and I think maybe the night before I was still about 64 kilos. So I had to basically just expel loads of water, which just means like sauna, dehydration, just all of the fun things that weightlifters love doing. And I think by about 9 p.m. the day before, I think I'd managed to get myself down to about 63.1 kilos. Perfect. I can just drive up in the morning, I'll weigh in, and yeah, it'll all be Gucci. But no, I got drug testers knocked on the door at probably just gone 9 o'clock, I think. So I had to basically put all of the water that I spent however long peeing out, like the whole like previous day. I basically had to replace all of that so I could pee into a cup for my drug test, which sucked because obviously that's just it's just going to take a long time. Like drug tests take a long time anyway. So I think this took I got to bed at 3 a.m. or something the day before. But I don't think I was competing till like fairly late in the day. So it was all okay. Managed to get myself down to weight again, but like obviously like my recovery was just terrible. I was just not in good shape. So opening lift comes for qualification day. 92 kilo snatch, got it above my head, stood up with it, and I've just lost it behind my head, but taken most of the important structures in my shoulder with it. So yeah, I couldn't lift my arm above my head. It was sort of swinging around like this when I tried, and I had about 2 minutes to decide whether I was going to go out for a second attempt, and I couldn't really feel my arm, but you take the second attempt because it's the Olympics we're talking about. Like we need this. So I tried again, and just I think I probably just made everything a hell of a lot worse for myself. So yeah, that was probably the biggest setback of my career. No Olympics in 2016, and just a long summer of recovery in Loughborough rather than in Rio. So yeah, good times.
And you had to draw on some pretty strong mental reserves during that period, I imagine, because
oh my God, yes.
Particularly as an Olympian, like let's say someone like Freddie, you have a bad game and you've normally got another game next weekend. You guys as Olympians go in these massive cycles, and it's all built around competition. So to then kind of miss that big one and have a long time before the next big competition, I think it really takes a lot of mental reserve and just a sort of mental ability to be able to overcome that, stay positive, stay focused on your career, etc., etc.
Yeah, it was a difficult time actually. At first I think I was in denial for a little while about it. So I had to have it operated on in the end. But I think for the first month or so leading up to selection, I basically just tried everything just to get it back in shape, get it in some sort of position where I could just use my shoulder, but no dice, I'm afraid. And I think that's when it really hit me. But I was really lucky actually to have a fantastic team around. The medical team at British Weightlifting at the time were fantastic. But also I think it was just having like a good family, good friends, and just people just to keep me mentally well is the only way I can possibly describe it. I think I'd have really struggled if it wasn't for them. But yeah, there were so many big questions kind of at the time. Things like, well, will I be able to lift again? Do I want to lift again? This was like a really traumatic thing to happen. Like, obviously the injury itself was pretty devastating, but I think it was then that I realized how like fragile, like as athletes, our career really is. So I was thinking, is this the like path that I want to keep taking? Have I made the right choices? And then just things about, like, obviously when I did start lifting again, like the fear around that, whether this was like a safe option. So yeah, I had to draw on quite a lot of mental strength there. And yeah, basically the only way I got through that was essentially like regular therapy sessions with like friends and family, just to help me out. And I do think I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about how to be mentally tough, really. These were things that I didn't know I had. Like, I'm a bit of a wallflower as a person in general. And I've got some fight in me, but it's not often that I have to really use it, I think. And this was one of the times that I really did have to use that fight. So I do feel like I learned quite a lot from the experience, but yeah, it was a tough time.
Can I just ask one bit there, Nick, if you don't mind, and then Zoe, and then maybe leading on to Freddie as well, which is, a lot of what I hear from just the players and the teams that I work with generally is that us men have a harder time sharing sometimes, which as a result causes more problems down the line. Whereas one of the things you just mentioned just before was that you got your sanity, you got that sort of therapy from sharing, from almost demonstrating, and I mean this in a positive sense, your vulnerability and your need to be able to tell people how you're actually feeling. I guess that's an incredible strength to be able to have at what must have been a really difficult time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is one thing that I do think is important, just sharing and talking about these things. So like with a lot of mental health stuff, because this is what it kind of boiled down to, I think it would have, if I hadn't spoken to it, it probably manifested as sort of like a deep depression, really. So the ability to share that with like having friends and family that I felt comfortable enough to share that with was really important, obviously. But yeah, it is. I think you are right. I think it is actually easier for women because we are encouraged to talk about these things, and mental health issues in men do arise a lot more as a result of like toxic masculinity, in a sense that it's viewed as a feminine trait to like share your problems and to like burden others with your issues. And I think that is something that I'm actually really passionate about. Just making sure, like in my immediate friendship circle and professional circle too, just making sure everyone feels comfortable enough that they can share and that we can talk about these things. That's something that I think is really like undervalued in society in general. I think obviously there's been a bit of a movement around it recently, but I think there's still a ways to go, and that's something that I would like to help kick on, really.
I definitely want to come back to that in a second. But it'd be good just to talk to you, Fred, a little bit about an instance when you've had to really draw on some mental resolve like that. And, because I think that, this is what DfY is all about, really, is helping those people that don't have that support circle, that don't have that, the mental skills to be able to overcome that, and trying our best to fill in those gaps a little bit. Now, Fred, I mean, one thing I, absolutely loved about, representing you for your whole career is just how open and honest you are. And, there's been a sort of a bit of a talk about the drop against Toulouse as a tough moment for you to have to come back from. But actually, an interesting one that doesn't really get much airtime is, I think it was against the European game against Mont de Marsan in 2013, and you were absolutely flying at Gloucester. You were in the England squad. I think it must have been a week or 2 weeks before the first England-Scotland game in the Six Nations. Set to start at fly half. You suffered an injury in that game and missed the whole Six Nations. And I think that was the Six Nations that sort of Ford and Farrell really kicked on and cemented themselves as to the favoured 10s or 10-12 combination for England. How was it to overcome from that injury that was a sort of a real sliding doors moment in terms of your England career?
Yeah, it's always it's always tough. And back then I was, like, say, I must have been 22, 23, and only a few months before I made my England debut against the All Blacks. So I was like flying. Like, I've never been in a better place. And suddenly, like that, boom, it's a punch in the face. It's like, you know, your whole world kind of falls apart. You're led on the floor. And I knew the minute the injury happened that it was, like, I knew it wasn't devastatingly bad, but I knew it was going to be a 2-3 month injury, which is the exact same period of the Six Nations. So I was like, you know, I was broken. But then at the same time, I've always been quite good at parking it up, and just, you know, my next goal then was, right, I am going to get back fit before the start of the Six Nations. And I actually managed to get on the bench for England against Italy in the last game. Unfortunately, didn't get on. But for me, I just tried to control what I could control, which was then, like, how I ate, how I recovered, my rehab. Like, I kind of tried to take as much control of that as possible. And it's one thing as well that, you know, it's why it's great to have someone like Zoe on board and hear about the way she talks, because, look, weightlifting, you're on your own. Like, you know, when I got that injury and I'm in the sheds, I get 23 players come up to me, wish me well, give me a cuddle. I get coaches check in on me. I get messages, as well as having a great support network for my family. Whereas the stuff that Zoe's been through, you're probably in there, you've probably got your coach there, but you've got one, and then it's just you and your thoughts. You're on your own. And I've always had so much, like, admiration for those Olympic sports and, you know, those not one-off sports, but Zoe will work behind closed doors for years to get one moment in the spotlight that has to be taken. And, you know, something like what happened, unfortunately happened to Zoe happens. To bounce back from that mentally is so tough. So I always feel very fortunate enough to be in a team environment where, you know, you pick each other up. You know, you take a little bit of stick, a little bit of banter, but you soon have your mind taken off of it. So, you know, you bounce back individually. Of course, you have your demons when you're on your own, but for me, it's a lot easier because I have a team and a support network around me, which is where I think the foundation is great, because, you know, the people that we'll be working with, on the whole, a lot of them come from, you know, broken homes and, slightly dysfunctional families and stuff like that. So if we can be that support network for these kids coming through, hopefully, like Robbo said, we can steer them on a path of, look, you can still achieve, even though you've had setbacks and not had to start, rather than actually, I'm just going to throw the towel in and become, you know, the worst version of myself. So, you know, I think we've got a great group in the foundation that can bounce off each other and talk about experiences. Because I'll be honest with you, I hear Zoe talking, and my experience of me getting injured 2 weeks before I was meant to play for England sounds like nothing compared to her. So it's like, I don't really see much of a comparison.
Can I just ask one point from both Fred and Zoe's perspective? And this is from my perspective as a very, very amateur footballer, cricketer and tennis player. I haven't been able to do anything relatively that well at all. But when you're recovering from injury, as you both have had and have had those setbacks, when you have those particular days when maybe motivation is not lacking, but you just don't feel you can get there, or you don't want to, or otherwise, is it a mindset of positivity, like, no, I need to do this because I feel I'm in a good place because I know that I can achieve? Or does the motivation sometimes come from a negative space, like, I'm angry, I'm pissed off, and that's the reason why I'm going to keep going and doing in order to achieve? Or is it like a combination of that? Or is it actually none of that whatsoever, is to, like, what actually gets you to get to that gym or gets you to that rehab place again?
I think for me it was a bit of a combination of both. So I do remember just feeling completely cheated out of everything I've worked for 4 years. So in a sense, yeah, I was pissed off. Like, this just felt completely unfair. And yeah, that there were obviously, like, when you're recovering, there are always going to be hard days. And there were negative thoughts a lot of the time, but like you say, sometimes those negative thoughts were kind of the kick up the arse that I needed to get myself back to the gym. But yeah, other times, like, it kind of depended. I think these things come in peaks and troughs really anyway, don't they? So there'll be other days where I did feel really positive about it. Like, I'd made some good progress. And then there'd come a day where I just kind of didn't really feel like going to the gym, but I was like, oh no, but your progress is going so well. Like let's just keep at it and just see where it goes. Let's not like take our feet off the gas now, because we're making some headway with this, and it might not be the end of the world. So yeah, it was like a combination of the two things. But there were also like times where I was unmotivated and I just didn't even feel particularly motivated to do anything about it. And those are the more challenging times where I just kind of thought, yeah, it's going well. Like I'm getting better, but realistically, like the Olympics is 4 years away and I just don't care right now. But I think it's important to be kind to yourself at those times as well. No one can be 100% like on their game 100% of the time. So I think it was just, I did have to listen to myself. And I think I've been competing now for about, it must be about 13 years, maybe more. Oh God. And I think like people talk about listening to your body, but I think you kind of need to listen to your head as well a little bit. There are times when you're not feeling motivated, but you have to push on. And then there are times where you're not feeling motivated, but you just kind of need to give yourself a little bit of a break as well. Like sometimes just if you're supposed to train 5 times a week, maybe just show up twice. And just kind of listen to what your head needs a little bit. And I think that was one of the things that I did find it difficult to do. Like this was 4 years ago now, but retrospectively, I do think I found that quite difficult. And there were days where I just beat myself up about it. But I think it was a bit of a learning curve. And I think I'm sort of a bit more kind of self-aware for it, really. So now I know if I'm just being lazy and if I just need to give myself a bit of a kick up the arse, or if it's maybe like a symptom of something, I don't want to say worse, but if I'm feeling like maybe just a little bit depressed or things like that. Obviously, over lockdown, things have been a bit like that. So yeah, it's been an interesting process of personal growth, really.
I think that's the thing as well. You never get it right. Like you always, it's always going to change. And one thing I learned from my injury before that England game was the minute I got back fit, I was like, I have to be at the standard that I was before immediately. And I'd go, and I was trying to run before I could walk again. It was like, Jesus, just give yourself a break. There's a great strength and conditioning coach at Bath called Matt Pickard, and I actually wasn't injured at Bath long term to do it, but he had a thing with the long term injured group because he was the rehab conditioner, and players had three lives. Right, so if they rocked up one day into the gym and they just weren't feeling it, they could turn around to Matty and say, "Look, like I'm not feeling it today," and he'd be like, "No worries, like you can, like that's fine." But you knew that. So if you were injured for 6 months, you knew you had 3 days if you weren't feeling it. So those days you get in, you go like, "Oh, you know what? I'm not really feeling that motivated, but I think I can get through it." You can get through it, but if you hit that brick wall, you could just go in there and say, "Matty, I don't feel it there," and he'd be like, "No worries, mate, get going." But once you had your 3, and I think that's one of the main things as well, is we all have bad days, we all make mistakes, we all f*** up, right? But it's making sure that they don't happen over and over and over again. Injuries you can't control, that comes and goes. But like for me, when I dropped the ball against Toulouse, it's just like, that's a mistake. Like I know I won't make it again. People make mistakes all the time. And it's just making sure that, those mistakes don't come. Like if I get the ball knocked out my hands again, like honestly, like I expect the contract to be ripped up and, do you know what I mean, booted out. I expect to be stoned to death if I drop the ball over the line again, right? To be honest with you, it was that bad a mistake. But at the same time, like Zoe said, you've got to be kind to yourself. But it's making sure that you take a day off, 2 days off, a week off, whatever it is you need, but then it doesn't become you falling into a trap of it being a month, 2 months, a year, and next thing you know, you're at the bottom of a slope that you don't want to be at, and the mountain to climb's a lot harder, and I'm sure Zoe will back this up. There's times when you don't feel it, you don't feel like doing the session, but actually you get the session done, and the accomplishment of just doing that session and getting through it is what then spikes you to go the next day and then get back on that roll. It only takes one little trigger to get you going again. and you're back in the role of it. So it's just having that balance. You know, we all need to kick up the ass sometimes when someone says, hey. And that's one thing I've been lucky with Robbo. You know, he's always given me straight up advice. You know, whether that was me as a youngster being like, calling him up after a game, buzzing, being like, man, I had a great win, I'm going out for a few beers. It'd always be, mate, just make sure that you don't do anything stupid and be like, but that's the little check you need. And this is where the foundation comes in. It's like, we want to be there for these kids and help them grow, but at the same time, we don't want to be their parents. But if they step out of line, we've got to be seen as someone who can just have that strong word and just guide them back in the right direction. And that's where we've all learned from, and it will all change. But that's where I think now, for me being 30, I can have that experience and hopefully just be able to guide these kids. And even in the short time at the ARC school, it was like you saw kids that were tearaways coming, and the first 10 minutes you were struggling to get their attention. But you take one of them to one side and have a chat and just give them a little bit of, or her one-on-one feedback. Suddenly they're back in the game, they're involved, and like the change you saw in some of these kids in the space of that term was unbelievable. And straight away, regardless of where this foundation goes.
Yeah, and Fred, I mean, you know, it was great watching you with the kids. You're sort of a bit of a natural, but
well, I'm a big kid, ain't I? Really, that's the problem.
I think
Yes, please.
You definitely kind of warmed to the rascals a little bit more, and
yeah,
100%. But you know, you're right, and I mean, in that term, you could really see, you know, though the kids that were kind of really not feeling it at the beginning and kind of standing on the side and not wanting to get involved, and also some that got involved but then got, you know, had some kind of emotional, you know, not quite breakdown, but, you know, there was often tears or fighting or whatever, and it was always seemed to be the same kind of group, sort of 4 or 5 kids, and those were really the ones that I think we want to be helping out. And, you know, you could see over the course of the term, they're the ones that really had the foundation had the most impact on. You know, I mean, there were some there that, you know, had no real use for DfY. They were absolutely fine. But yeah, I think there were some that we could, you know, even in a short time that we were there, you could really see benefit from. And they're the ones whose eyes kind of lit up at the beginning of the sessions, and the teacher said, we're really looking forward to, you know, the next Wednesday, etc., etc. So that was really rewarding, wasn't it?
Freddie, can I just ask maybe one point there that Nick brought up, which was, and maybe the same for Zoe, for when you've been able to interact, is that when it sounded like you were naturally gravitating towards the certain types of characters in the classroom, is that because that was the role that you played when you were younger, and then did you empathize with them, or did you actually know the best types of tools or behaviors to get the best out of them as a result?
I naturally gravitate to those because I think that like I'm probably one of the most competitive people you ever meet, right? But at the same time, I can also have a laugh, and I feel like sports sometimes is like you can't be seen to have a sort of laugh and a joke. It has to be, you make a mistake, you've got to be like kicking balls and lobbing. Whereas sometimes, like, you made a mistake. Like, sometimes someone will get hit in the face with a ball in training, and it's hilarious. But you'll get, like, after squad won't even laugh. I'm on the floor. Like, that was just me. I like having, like, a laugh and a joke. And, you know, I know it's easy to want to go back to, but it's like the Toulouse drop ball. Like, I don't mind people taking the piss out of me for it. I'm like, I made a mistake. Like, it's fine. But in terms of those kids, I feel like they're the kids that people go, they've got no hope. When actually they're the kids with a twinkle in their eye that have got something special. You know, I like the people that are outside the box. I like the people that are, you know, you get the sort of nodding dogs that can sit there both in all walks of life. We all know them, the ones that sit there and they're sort of teacher's pet and they're fine and they're great and they're happy sitting in their role and just ticking over day by day. But those kids that have got a little bit of rascal about them, they're the ones that they're the special ones to me. And I think they're the ones that, if you can nurture them a little bit, can go a hell of a long way. But it's having that, giving them that purpose and that little bit of guidance, you know, because you know that there's certain people where they, you know, you give them simple instructions, they execute it. And those people are great, you know, they're fine. But I just gravitate to those people that they do need a little bit of, they've got a little bit about them, a little bit of backbone, a little bit of cheek, because they're not lost causes. If anything, they're the ones that can blow up and really go and succeed and blow all expectations, which is what the foundation's all about.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? They're the ones that are actually on a knife edge, and they can go either way depending on the environment and their influences, you know. And I think that's what we're trying to do. If they don't have the positive role models, we're trying to be that for them and allow them to, you know, go up the right side of the knife edge, really. And that's kind of our sort of our mantra a little bit, is defying the odds, defying the stereotypes, and defying the expectations. Because a bit like you said, Fred, you know, sometimes these kids are just seen, people give up on those kids pretty easily, and that just tends to compound their situation. You know, but actually, you know, they've got a lot of potential in them. It's just that the environment that they live in isn't conducive to that revealing itself.
Yeah, it's also, just to cut in on that, it's like, you know, I had a great upbringing. I come from a close family. I had a great group of mates, stuff like that. Like, I still had a fight when I was 16 in town, and a week later got arrested by the police and spent the day in a cell and had to go, and that scared the out of me, because right then I was on the cusp of getting an academy contract at Bath or being part of the Bath Academy, and suddenly, just like that, I'm sat in a cell because I've been, you know, regardless of the situation and how it occurred, but then, you know, I was lucky it was just a fight, and that was, do you know what I mean? And it was kind of like, I was at that age where it was like a reprimand or whatever, and just don't do it again. Whereas these kids nowadays, especially with social media and all this sort of stuff, you see like knife crime, you see like, you know, it's very easy. Like when I was between 16 and 18, I'd go out and have a few drinks with my mates, and we'd end up getting in fights with people. Like half the time I got my head kicked in. But it was like, that was, and it took me being arrested to realise that, hang on, like, life ain't a joke. You can't just get away with everything all the time. And it's just, you know, you've got to get to these kids before it starts, because, you know, it only takes, you hear knife crime and stuff like that, but that's the influence that kids have now. And they're so easily influenced that one of them, if they're going out in London, I know we're working with 10, 11-year-olds, but when they get to 13, 14, 15 and they start hanging around with their mates, they get into a bit of gang culture. They just take their kitchen knife, put it in their back pocket. They get into a bit of trouble just because of what they've seen and the environment they're in. You know, they could be staring at a jail sentence for like murder, or, do you know what I mean? Like grievous bodily harm or this sort of stuff. And we want to stop it getting to that level, because these kids can be a lot more if you just get to them early enough.
Zoe, can I ask, what sort of guidance have you sort of provided already, or mentorship, or just generally in terms of what you've seen, or what you've had to do as part of your role already, that you've either felt fulfilled by or just felt that you could give something back for?
Oh, I must admit, I actually haven't had any hands-on experience with the kids yet. I'm pretty new to the team, really. So, yeah, I must be honest, not a lot. But to be honest, the kind of kids that I am quite looking forward to, like, getting involved with, are the ones that are more like me, I guess. Like, I suppose we all kind of like have a bit of a bias to people that we kind of tend to see a bit of ourselves in. I'm lucky that I had like a great support network growing up to bring out the best in me. But I was like I say, just a really shy, kind of retiring wallflower type. I would never put my hands up in class. I just wanted to kind of like stand to the side and kind of just let stuff happen. And I'm still a little bit like that now, to be honest. Even when Nick asked me to do this podcast, I was a bit like, oh, does anyone really want to hear what I've got to say? So yeah, really, I'm quite looking forward to working with the kids that kind of just don't want to put themselves forward, and may end up missing out on opportunities just because they didn't have that confidence just to speak out for themselves, or just to put themselves into the spotlight. That's something that I've always really struggled with my whole life. I still do struggle with it a bit now. So I guess, yeah, if we can learn on the job together, that would be great. So I'll have to kind of find that within me in order to help these kids find it within themselves, I guess. So it's a mutually beneficial partnership. I guess they'll be helping me every bit as much as I'll be helping them, if not more. So that's kind of what I'm really quite excited about.
Sorry, there was one girl there, I don't know if you remember, Fred, but in our pilot scheme last year, she was really, really quiet, didn't put her hand up for anything, didn't really say anything. And we allocated people into, we had 60 kids, I think. We split them into 4 groups of 15, and we would play games within that. And so we were playing, I think, tag rugby or tag bulldogs or something. And this girl suddenly, from being, you know, the kind of quiet wallflower standing at the back, was just the most natural athlete. And she was just absolutely carving through people. No one could touch her. And she just completely came into, you know, into her own, into her element. And just her whole personality changed, you know, smile from ear to ear. And, you know, it kind of reminded me a little bit of your personality, you know, just quite quiet, but then suddenly you go out to perform on the stage, and you're just like, you turn into a completely different person. It was.
I think cool. Part of it is just finding your niche in a way. My mum always said this about me as well. When I started weightlifting, like I did gymnastics before that, but I wasn't very good, to be honest. I never really liked the sort of showing off element of it either. It's just not me. But then she was like, "Oh, you did your first weightlifting competition and just totally came to life. Like it was like a different person. I've never seen so much confidence in you." And I think that is part of it. I think it's just helping people find, like, just to have the confidence to try new things. Because I would have never tried weightlifting if I just kind of wasn't like shoehorned into it, really. But it's kind of been the thing that's been the biggest personal developer for me. But it's just something I'd have never have tried if I wasn't pushed into it. So I think just helping kids find a bit more confidence within themselves, just finding a little bit of it will just help them kind of develop into like who they want to become, really, I think. And that's a big thing for me.
I think that's one thing as well that's great. And Robbo, you'll say from the pilot scheme as well, is that obviously it was very male dominated. It was a lot of rugby lads, but to have Zoe on board, to have Claire Cashmore on board is like someone for the girls to look up to, and especially someone, I know Zoe, you're very humble, but like silence isn't like weakness, like being shy isn't weakness. Like Zoe is, you know, funny, a great person to be around, and like unbelievable at what she does. And like girls will be able to look and say, you know, I'm quite happy being the loud one, running around, tagging and all that sort of stuff. But it's in the quiet moments when you can get someone's personality and chat. And I feel like the group that we've now got together at the foundation is just one that can bounce for all different people. You know, it just shows we've got such a good group of athletes and people that have been through it and done it in their own different way. And I think the way Zoe goes about her business is class. The way Claire goes about her business is class. And these girls that we're going to go to as well, because a lot of people talk about the boys running around in rugby values and all this stuff, but the stuff the girls are going to bring to the foundation is going to be invaluable.
I love that. I've been fascinated just to hear the conversation and all the different directions it's gone, which is awesome. And my view, depending on Nick, on what you think as well, is I'd love to like even make this a little bit of a regular thing, is the truth. Like, why couldn't we do this every few months and just like have a chat about new things that have gone on, experiences, or talk about particular subjects? I think which would be cool, because ultimately I think, you know, just the average sports person that might be listening to this or not, you know, Zoe and Fred have spoken so articulately about what they do day to day that I'm sure those insights would be interesting for others as well. So maybe we can think about that. I'm not sure it's going to be quite the lucrative TV revenues for you guys just yet, but hopefully in time.
I think it's a great idea, because I think that, you know, there's a great message there. I mean, you see Zoe, you know, breaking records. You see Freddie playing for England and, you know, playing in massive European games and playing, you know, now going to Japan and playing rugby across the world. But I think what we've seen, you know, this school, I mean, I've known that side of them for a long time anyway, but, you know, what you see there is really the vulnerability of someone, which completely contrasts to the pedestal that, perhaps we put some of these stars on. So, hopefully that's of use to just your everyday person as well, to who does suffer with self-doubt or anything like that, that actually even the very best have all those fears and all those apprehensions, and have to kind of talk themselves round to overcoming them before, performing their best.
Yeah, exactly. And if we can end up on one question, I'm not sure if Nick gave you prior warning for, guys, which was, well, the one thing I like to just ask everybody for the last question is, and because there's been a bit of downtime lately as well, and everybody's probably on Netflix or listening to a podcast or reading a book or doing their things more generally, has there been anything that you've either watched, listened to, or read over the last few months that's really resonated, that you've enjoyed, that's been inspirational, or that you've literally just binge watched because you've been bored as hell and have wanted to pass some time? Don't know, Zoe, do you want to go first?
I'll go then. I'm a bit late to the party with this one. It's not very well, it kind of is in a way. It's not education or anything. Afterlife. Watched it for the first time during lockdown. It's brilliant.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, absolutely loved it. Yeah, so unfortunately, I'm about to start reading a book called, I think it's like Women Don't Owe You Pretty by Florence Given, which is a bit more on message, I suppose. But I've not actually started it yet. I was gifted it by a friend who is a very staunch feminist. So I'm looking forward to reading that. But yeah, my thing of lockdown has been Afterlife.
Love Afterlife. The other thing that I've watched during Afterlife, sorry, because this isn't about me at all, but I'm just going to share as well, is Fleabag that I watched a few months ago. It was crazy. That's one of the best things I think I've ever watched.
I loved Fleabag. I watched it a little while ago, actually. Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Completely agree. I'd advise, if you haven't watched it, watch it.
I'm looking at the bottom row of Fred and Nick, and I'm not sure they watched it just yet. But
yeah, I feel like
I haven't seen it, I must admit.
No, it's really, really good. Freddie, is there anything that you've come across lately that you've enjoyed?
I think probably the obvious one for most sports fans, and I'd be disappointed if anyone hadn't watched it, was The Last Dance. I feel like, and it's kind of so on point about what we're chatting about here as well, in terms of the different personalities and the different traits that everyone brought to that Chicago Bulls team. And the one thing that stood out for it more than anything was, who's the head coach? What's the head coach's name? Jackson? Phil Jackson.
Phil Jackson. I was going to say Peter Jackson, but that's not right.
Yeah, I was going to say Peter Jackson, but didn't he direct Lord of the Rings or something? I don't know. Yeah, like, just because of, like, obviously all the personalities that were in that team, from, Michael Jordan to Scottie Pippen to Dennis Rodman, like, you've got everything from one end of the spectrum to the other. Yet the bit that stood out to me is you had one guy who understood every single one of them and what made him tick to get the best out of them. And that for me was like the best thing I've watched in a long time. And yeah, the other thing I started doing is, obviously, I started reading a few Japanese books, trying to learn the language. And the only nugget I have done, which has really helped me I've only done it the last 10 days, and it's not reading anything. I've actually started leaving my phone away from my bed at night, because at the minute I'm a free spirit and I just, I don't really have anything to do in the day as such. I was waking up with the alarm and then just snoozing it and staying in bed till 10, 11 o'clock and getting nothing out of my day. So I've started putting it away from the bed, and it gets me up and out, and I just feel so much better for it. So there's my little nuggets there.
I quite like that. I charge my phone downstairs. Again, not this is about me, but it's quite nice because it means like the last hour or so of my day has nothing to do with my phone. So I'm disconnected, and particularly in my industry, you're getting messages and things going on the whole time. So it kind of clears your head and everything before bed. And then the first hour of the day, my kids wake me up at, sadly, like 5 to 6 every day, but I actually get a good hour of playing with them before I even look at my first message, which there's quite a few by the time the mornings come around, and it actually gives a really good work-life blend, I'd say, rather than balance, because they tend to sort of merge into one. But just a really nice bit of space at the beginning and the end of the day away from the daily grind.
Yeah, no, I really like that. Well, on that note, I think let's make a promise, or I'm going to try and make a promise to Nick that we'll try and do this again sooner rather than later.
That'd be amazing.
That's good.
Freddie, I'm going to try and introduce you at the right time through Nick to a couple. I used to work in Japan quite a lot on a regular basis, so I've got some Japanese lawyer pals that are really good guys out in Japan. I'm going to try and introduce you to show you around maybe as well.
Yeah, I'd really appreciate it. That'd be great. I need some. I'm going to need some friends, mate, going out there on my own.
Exactly.
Oh, konnichiwa! I don't know what's going to happen.
Mate, it's going to be fantastic. But thank you so much for you guys for joining, and Nick for organising it. And hopefully this can be the first of a few.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, Dan.
Yeah, thank you.